Hi, in this business topic video, we're going to take a look at an aspect of strategic management that's called retrenchment. Now, retrenchment is almost the opposite of what we normally expect to see from business strategy, which is all about growth. In contrast, retrenchment is all about cutting back, doing less, maybe using more resources more carefully. It's also about scaling back the nature of the operations, the ambition of the business. And we see lots of examples of it in action in business. As you keep an eye on the business news, look out for announcements of businesses that are reducing the scale of their output, perhaps significantly cutting back capacity by closing a production line or shutting a factory. Look also for announcements of large redundancies and job losses, perhaps as a business decides to delayer, simplify and flatten the organisational structure, or perhaps just in response to a significant reduction in demand. Another good example will be where a business withdraws or removes a product from the market, or perhaps leaves a market completely, but perhaps a geographical market that it's not been successful in. Retrenchment is also about making decisions about the business portfolio. So, for example, a decision to dispose of a division or a business or a portfolio of brands will be a good example. And also, retrenchment can involve a significant scaling back or reduction in planned investment programs. Lots of examples out there of retrenchment in business, and it's important to understand why it takes place. Often it's because a business has found itself being uncompetitive, certainly lacking competitive advantage against other firms in the industry. You often see this when a business realizes that its operating costs are too high. It's operating at a cost disadvantage compared with the rest of the competitors. It can be the case also that retrenchment is the strategic option chosen when it's determined that the return on investment or return on capital employed is too low. Or perhaps there's a financial issue that the business has too high a level of gearing and is struggling to meet the financial demands of paying the interest and repaying the debt. Retrenchment is often a response to when a business has lost its market leadership position, or when it's engaged, maybe perhaps a previous management team is engaged on a high-risk takeover strategy that proves to have been a mistake in retrospect. And of course, you also see it a lot by many firms in industries when an industry or the economy as a whole goes through a downturn in demand. All of those factors, and sometimes a business finds themselves with one or more of those factors at the same time, all of those indicate the need for strategic change, and retrenchment is essentially a strategic decision to scale back or reduce the size of the business. Just two or three examples to explain what we mean by this. This one is a classic example from 6 or 7 years ago. A guy called Stephen Elop was appointed as the CEO of Nokia, which had previously been the global market leader in mobile phones. And he wrote a famous memo. In fact, it was a speech that was then turned into a memo to all of the Nokia staff to say that the business was faced with a strategic crisis and the only way was to jump off what he called a burning platform and to take some fairly drastic decisions in order to survive. The consequence of his strategy of retrenchment was 40,000 plus job losses, but eventually even that didn't succeed and Nokia was eventually sold or bought by Microsoft. Another classic example of retrenchment is Tesco's failed effort to enter the US grocery market. It did this by creating a new grocery brand called Fresh and Easy, invested a significant amount in the business, but after a series of years of heavy losses, the new management team at Tesco finally decided to bite the bullet and leave the US market at a significant cost to shareholders. And finally, one more, perhaps even a little bit more recent than Nokia and Tesco's, the new leadership of Microsoft in 2014, a guy called Satya Nadella, took over from Steve Ballmer, and one of his first decisions was to announce a significant delayering of the business, a significant simplification of Microsoft's organizational structure, as well as the closure of much of the Nokia mobile phones business that they had bought. And as Satya Nadella said, the aim of the retrenchment was to drive greater accountability in the business, and to make Microsoft more agile, enable it to be able to move faster in what he wanted to do, which is to reposition the business in a cloud and mobile first market. Of course, retrenchment has significant implications and links to another concept that you may be studying called change management. The significance of retrenchment on change management, of course, depends to a large extent on just how significant the scale and scope of the trimming down is. So, lots of small scale cutbacks really only have a limited impact on change, but if it's a very significant retrenchment, then the change management issues are significant. So let's just finish by having a think about what some of those implications for change management would be from a strategy of retrenchment. We mentioned that the process often involves significant job losses and is often driven by the need to improve the efficiency and the cost effectiveness of the organisational structure. So a key implication for change, if we're looking at a strategy of, for example, delayering, would be what the implications are for the new management responsibilities. New teams, new structures will be formed, new reporting structures, and potentially greater workload left with those who are left within the business. What's the implications for that? How is that managed? We often see a strategy of retrenchment arising when new leadership is appointed into the business, particularly at the CEO level. And this often comes along with a different leadership style. Now, inevitably, from a change point of view, that's going to create some uncertainty, some anxiety, particularly perhaps amongst the management who may be affected by it. So the implications for change are quite wide-ranging there, particularly also if the retrenchment is associated with a desire to change the organisational culture. But perhaps retrenchment is most significantly associated with simply fewer people being left in the business. You often see the most significant strategies involve many tens of thousands of job losses across the organisation. And that's not just arising from delayering, it can be from the closure of business units. What's the impact for change in terms of maintaining the morale and motivation of the workforce? And how is that process communicated to external stakeholders? So we've given you a brief introduction to this important strategic concept called retrenchment.